Hi, and welcome to another episode of
Claim Matters.
Today we're going to talk about the exterior of your house and how to document and photograph so that if an event happens like hurricane season, you'll have a great record of what's actually going on already on the exterior of your house, so you'll know what's new and what was pre-existing. How do we do that?
So one of the things we want to make sure we do is get a decent camera, and your phone is a good enough camera. Nowadays, 12 megapixels, 4 megapixels is fine. So go to each elevation of your house, stand back, take an overview of that elevation, and then put on your video camera and zoom in close and just slowly go around your entire house so you've got a close-up of, not right on top of, but close enough to be able to zoom in and get some close-ups if you need them.
Great idea. And talk to us a little bit, what are the different kind of exteriors that we have?
So one of the things we're often going to see on a house is stucco. Stucco is that hard cement, almost finish that's then normally painted, or you can paint the outside, or the stucco itself can be colored. What happens with stucco is when the wind talks that house, very often you're going to find cracks in the stucco. And the problem with cracks in the stucco is water then gets into, rainwater gets in those cracks, rainwater gets behind the stucco, and very often it'll rot the stucco. Another thing you're going to find is wind-borne debris hitting your stucco. And when you see it, it's either going to tear it up and you'll see the mesh behind it. It could be a nylon mesh, sometimes an old chicken wire mesh, but you'll see what's behind it, and it'll often be fresh and white, and over time it'll start to discolor.
That's how you know when it's fresh versus
Yes.
when it's been there for quite a while. One of the other exteriors is going to be a brick veneer. So you have brick all the way or part of your way around your house. You want to look very closely at the mortar and see if you have cracks in that mortar. Sometimes you'll see stair-step cracks. Sometimes you'll see it go through the brick. But you want to check and see, do I already have some of those cracks in my mortar? Or because a hurricane came through and shook my house, did it cause a bunch of cracks? So you're going to note whether you had cracks before or after. The other thing you want to check is how big are those cracks, especially after a storm. If you can stick a credit card inside that crack, it's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
You're going to have to repoint your house.
Yes.
If it's hairline, then you can do some other things to kind of fill that gap and make sure that moisture isn't getting inside of there. So you want to get really good pictures of any damage that you have. And you'll be surprised, in a hurricane, that flying debris, like somebody's fence from two houses down, comes and hits your house, you can take a chunk out of that brick in a minute. Trampolines, yeah, they like to fly, definitely.
We saw a condenser unit picked up by the wind and thrown onto a house.
Wrapped around a tree and slid down. It was absolutely crazy.
Susan, when I'm looking at cracks in the mortar, what are some keys to identifying fresh cracks versus old cracks?
If you have little bits of debris, or like we like to call them chads, still in that crack, it's going to be fresh. If it's been around for a couple of years, you're going to see softened corners on it. It's not going to be quite as sharp as if it's brand spanking new.
Good call. Another type of exterior that we see, especially on the older homes, is a metal siding. Now, here's the problem with metal siding. You cannot repair it because the way it's structured, it hooks into the panel above it, the course above it, which means to take a panel out, you've got to damage the course above. So one ding on metal siding and you replace the entire elevation. And folks, most metal siding has been there for 20, 30 years, so there are probably lots of dings on it. It's easy to find dings. How do you find dings? Take a flashlight in the evening and hold it on the metal siding and run it around the siding and look for shadows. You'll see shadows where there are dings caused either from wind-borne debris or the wind tearing up a piece of that metal siding, causing a dent further down the run because of the pressure.
Where do you look for as far as height-wise?
Great question. So very often a lawnmower is going to ding siding, vinyl or metal siding. Somebody carrying a suitcase could ding metal siding. Anything below the waist has a fair chance of being non-storm related. So typically when we're doing an investigation on siding, we're looking for anything above the waist. I was down a property today and it had happened to have metal siding on it, and I was with the adjuster. We saw a couple of good hits on 2 of the 3 sides that had metal siding. The third side, I saw a number of hits below my waist, and I looked at him. I said, listen, this siding has been here for 30 years. You know we're going to find some higher hits. If you want me to, I can do that. Write it up, and if need be, we'll go get some other photographs. What other siding is there?
Well,
Susan?
very common is vinyl siding. So we see a lot of that. And vinyl siding actually will take a rock hitting it without cracking it frequently. But if it's coming at 110 miles an hour, it's typically going to crack that vinyl or ding it really bad, put a hole in it perhaps. Yes. Even. So when you're looking at vinyl siding, you want to look for holes and cracks. You want to see if that vinyl siding has peeled off. Today, one of the inspections I had, the vinyl siding had peeled off and they had taken just regular screws and just screwed it back in just to keep the water out. It was a temporary fix. Unfortunately, that adjuster wanted to make it sound as if it was a permanent fix, but we had a conversation.
No.
I won.
There you go.
But anyway, tell us about the profiles and the type.
So there are 3 things you're looking for in siding. Great question, Susan. One is the color. We've got to match the color. The second is the profile. You get a straight lap or a Dutch lap. They're 2 different styles of siding. And then the grain in the siding. Vinyl siding all has a grain in it. Very little siding is smooth. It's always got a grain. And over time, manufacturers change the color and the grain. They don't often change the size, but we do have to match color and grain and profile to get a repair on siding.
And not every state has a matching statute. So if it's not matching and we're in another state, our argument is if you have one side of your house that is 16 feet up and it's got 10 feet up one kind of siding and then the rest of it is another kind of siding, that has diminished the value of your home. And one of the things that an insurance policy does is it doesn't really protect your house. We'd have to put a bubble over your house for it to protect your house. What an insurance policy does is it protects the value of your home.
That's right.
And it's supposed to put your house back to the value of your home pre-event.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. There's many different ways to get all of that siding taken care of, even if it's not in a matching state.
You know, folks, sometimes you look at siding and you see it's got a dent in it. Most times storms don't dent siding because you need heat to dent it. When it's storm damage, it's going to be cracked or it's going to have holes poked in it. So sometimes if there's heat, there was that one claim we were dealing with where the sun would come every day and reflect off the neighbor's window. And as the sun moved, that reflection would take a path along the siding and it bubbled all along. The insured had no idea what was causing it. The insurance company said, we cannot identify the cause. Once we identified the window, well, then it was a covered loss. Right. Of course, but then the question is, well, what do you do with your neighbor? You put an awning on the window, you take the window out, that got really complicated.
Black, go over with a spray can. Well, it depends on how well you get along with your neighbor.
Up to that point, afterwards it may change. Then the one of the other common types of siding we see is wood siding. It's cedar plank. The reason they use cedar is there is built into cedar an insect repellent. So ants aren't going to bore, termites aren't going to bore, bees are typically not going to bore. Now they use cedar and they overlap it. Typically it's a straight lap structure, and sometimes your nailing, your securing is recessed under the panel that's above it. Sometimes it's face nailed. How does that impact what we do, Susan?
If it's recessed or non-exposed, and you have a cedar plank that's cracked, broken, split, whatever the situation is, in the middle of your elevation, to be able to fix that properly, you have to take that entire elevation of wood off to be able to start and put it all back so that you don't have any of that fasteners exposed.
Yep.
So, and we also see that in hardy plank as well.
Yes.
And I think hardy plank is probably one of the most
resilient.
Resilient. That's a great word. That's what we keep him around for, the word guy. It's the most resilient exterior I think you can have. You know, things bounce off of it much better. It takes a lot to damage hardy plank, but when you do, it's usually concealed fastener so you don't see those screws or those nails.
Yes.
And you have to replace that entire side. And those also have a grain to them.
Yes, they do. And that depends because it's manufactured, they're able to put a grain to it. By the way, that's how to identify whether you have true wood or a manufactured product. True wood, they don't put a profile, it's a straight cut. It may have a visual grain, but it won't have a grain that you can feel, a dimensional grain. If you look at it and it's got a dimensional grain, that's not manufactured, that's not sawn wood, that's manufactured.
Yes.
You know, then very occasionally we're going to, especially on the really, really older houses like the city, like where I grew up on that side of the railway tracks, the asbestos siding. Nowadays, it's not available. You're not allowed to go back with it. EPA says it's toxic, so we need to do all sorts of things to remove it. What are some of the challenges with removing it?
Well, if you remove it, you've got to put a dust tent over, you know, which means a huge tent over your entire structure while they're doing it. And it's a fortune to take it to the dumps that are accepting of asbestos.
Yes, not all do.
Not all do. And the ones that do, boy, it's a pretty penny to dump that asbestos there. So most of the time, if we have an asbestos exterior that's damaged, the best recommendation is to probably put vinyl over top of it. It's a little bit better than a hardy plank because you're not nailing into it and causing dust, but that vinyl works really well, and now they have to pay to vinyl your whole house.
Yes. The only other types of siding that I can think that we'll sometimes run across are actual masonry siding, where it's proper stone. Obviously, that's impervious to hail and most storm, although a huge tornado is going to damage that. On brick, here's an interesting thing. I've only seen it once. What will happen up in the northern states is because of the cold temperature, brick is porous. When it rains in the storm, it fills with water. And then when that water freezes, those little bits of water in the brick expand and they kick off little chips. Now, there will be thousands of little chip bricks down in the flower bed. It's called spalling, S-P-A-L-L-I-N-G. Very seldom do you see it, but things like brick and stone are mostly impervious unless we've got a huge category 4 or 5 that we're dealing with.
Yep. Thanks for joining us on another episode of
Claim Matters.
Hey, and feel free to hit the subscribe button below so you can watch more.
Also, if you've got questions about a claim that you're having, dial the number below and we'd be delighted to help you.
Thanks again. Bye.